Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here. Like I mentioned, I was going to be listening in.
Yeah,
Can't
no
wait
worries.
to see what we go over.
It's all good. Welcome everyone to our October Klamath Film meeting from here at Retro Room Records, and for those of you online, hopefully we'll have a few people still kind of meandering in and joining online as well. There's a bunch of SOU students that said that they were going to join. And we have a guest tonight that's going to be joining us around 6:30, James Westby, who is a documentary filmmaker based up in Portland. Those of you who were part of our 2020 film festival, you might have seen his documentary At the Video Store was probably featured at KIF that year. So first, let me go ahead and jump forward because we do have a couple of things I wanted to run through, and starting off with the fact that right now there is actually a position of need if anyone wants to do sound for a film that is about to go into production. We need someone with on-set experience for audio for a film that's going to be shooting here in Klamath Falls in the next week or two. So if you are interested, know someone who might be able to do that, Jeffrey Grellman, who has come to our meetings in the past, is about to go into production on his next film. Was looking for somebody. We had our film festival a couple weeks ago. Yay, we did a thing. So the 10th annual Klamath Independent Film Festival took place the 16th through the 18th, and everyone, or just about everyone here, participated in that in some way. Thank you. We gave out awards. Our best Northern feature film was Because We're Family. Best Southern was The Lost Salmon. Our best Northern short was Crouching Comic. Our best Southern short was On the Edge, and we gave out 3 awards for K through 12 films. So best Northern K through 12, best Southern K through 12, and we also gave an award from our film camp. So this was our 3rd year of a summer film camp for middle school and high school kids that we taught in July. And then those kids went off and made their own films. And we had one that just was heads and tails above the rest, we thought. And that was a film called Find Your Way. So I actually have that loaded where we can watch it. Hopefully the sound comes through on your end. If it doesn't, I will put the YouTube link into the chat so that the 3 of you currently on our Zoom, and if anyone else joins, they can check it out. Because I never really know if when I embed a video, if the sound is actually going to come through on the Zoom call or not. So I will put that in the chat as we get. In fact, here I'll punch that in right now. So in the chat is the link to the film Find Your Way. So when we get to that point, if for some reason audio isn't coming through, you can flip over to that and watch YouTube or watch it at your leisure. That's a film that a 15-year-old female student in my film camp who had never even picked up a camera before had an idea about a traveling musician, because she and her sister and mom had gone on a train ride and met someone who was just riding the rails and playing music on the train for all the passengers, and was so inspired by that they wanted to make a film around it but didn't know quite how to do that, so they asked for some help. Our board member Bowen Browder, who's a regular at these meetings, ended up acting in it as the only actor in the film. I did drone work on it. I helped with editing, but she and her sister came up with the script and filmed it and did almost all the camera work. I just kind of supervised it, and I thought the film came out really great. It's about 4 minutes long. We'll check that out in a bit. But we had quite a time with our festival. There is, Because We're Family film crew from Portland winning. As with our last 2 years, we partnered with the Southern Cascade Woodcrafters Guild here in Klamath to produce our trophies. Still, to my knowledge, we are the only film festival around that does this. But we have wood carving artists here in Klamath make trophies specific to each of our winning films. So as opposed to just getting a statue or a little plaque or something, their film probably features a coffee can that holds their mom's ashes. And so their trophy that I'm opening up there as they receive it is a coffee can with a lid that comes off. The other trophies, there is an award for the film Crouching Comic, which is all about a stand-up comedian, an amateur stand-up comic in Portland who is preparing for an open mic night, and she's going around her house prepping her routine. And so like she'll be brushing her teeth, and all of a sudden the background will switch and she's like telling jokes on stage with with her toothbrush being the microphone. So her award was a toothbrush on a microphone stick. And then we had the gentleman on the left there is Bill Reed from Southern Cascade Woodcrafters Guild. He's the one who made all of our trophies this year. And he's made a lot of our trophies over the last 3 years. Very sweet gentleman here in town who just loves wood crafting and wood carving of any variety. And he's the president of the organization. So he came out on Sunday, and he's come out for the final night for the last 3 years for our festival to be a part of that ceremony when all of our filmmakers receive the awards. And he gets a kick out of seeing the reactions, because I work with him for several months in advance. Typically, we take film submissions February 1st through June 1st. Then we go through an extensive judging process, and usually by the first weekend of August, I know who our winners are. And so I pass Bill the trailers or snippets of the films, and then he and the other woodworkers go off and just come up with crazy designs off on their own. And it's always incredible to see what they come up with. And I usually don't see what they make until just a couple of days before the festival. So they're off for a month, sometimes a month and a half, just whatever they get inspired by the 4 or 6 films that we're giving awards to. And then Bill shows up at my house one morning with a big box of all these crazy one-of-a-kind things. And if you were there Sunday, or if you've been there Sunday for previous years, like we were last year, the reaction from these filmmakers is so genuine, because a lot of films, if they're popular, they may make the rounds of other festivals. They end up with a bunch of statues and plaques. And then they get this thing that is totally unique to their film. The other things may go in the closet, but our trophies go on the coffee table, is what we usually do. So this one that you're seeing right here, this is Shane Anderson. He won for Best Southern Feature Film for a film, The Lost Salmon. His award, or his film, was about declining salmon populations in the Klamath River tributary, and how the pending dam removals may affect the revival of certain salmon species. And so his trophy, it's kind of hard to see in that photo, but it is a wall, like a dam, with a giant salmon breaking through the middle of it, with the dam kind of breaking apart from the fish head popping through it. So it's a salmon breaking through a dam was his award. He was really tickled pink with that award. Bill's got a bit of a smirk on him as well. Our other award there is Katie Falkenberg. Her film On the Edge was about a fishing trip that she took with friends. I know it's kind of a smaller shot, way up in the mountains, and about this hiking trip that they took through recently burned areas. So it also touches on some environmental issues in terms of changing environments. But really, it's just the joy of friends going fishing. But it was shot really well. And so her award is a piece of wood made to look like a mountain with a big fishing pole coming out of the top of it. And beyond that, our festival, we had panel discussions with every single filmmaker. So there's our K through 12 filmmakers Sunday morning up on stage talking to us about, most of those students were in our camp. Not all of them, but most of them were. One of them had been in the camp the previous year. And we had, that's our locals panel. Lori, Cassidy's on the far left there asking questions, our executive director. And Lori Nussbaum, and then Ray Robison, Sean Johnson, and then Michelle and Henry from Wahoo Films are on the far right there talking about films that were shot locally here in Klamath County. And then I know it's kind of hard to see, but that's our really fascinating panel and really well-attended panel about Indigenous culture issues. We had 2 films about Modoc tribes, and in between them, we brought in some of the filmmakers, a local historian to talk about Modoc Wars. Some members of Klamath tribes were there, as well as one of the actors from the film, and a native speech pathologist and like linguistic historian is that's me on the far left, and sitting just to my right is Joe, who works for I think it's Kansas or Kansas State University. Came in to be a part of this. He'd worked on a short film called This Is Their Land that was shot last year in Tule Lake that we helped out with immensely. And this was the world premiere of This Is Their Land. And so Joe came out, some of the filmmakers, some of the actors, as well as we had a large contingent of tribal members come down from Chillicothe, which is wonderful to have them in the audience to spend about 45 minutes talking about tribal history in our region, as well as current issues and how to be a better partner and neighbor with local tribes and things we can work through. Also, we had one of the actors from the film join us via Zoom. You can see his neck, but not his full face up on the big screen there. That was Ramon. And then we had a major bucket list moment for me that, I grew up in Eugene, and I was almost born at the Dexter Lake Club. My mom went into labor while my parents were sailing on Dexter Lake. So National Lampoon's Animal House has always had a very, very special connection in my life. And for our opening night, we celebrated National Lampoon's Animal House. So that's me jumping dressed as John Belushi with a bunch of people in togas on stage dancing to Shout during the fraternity party scene. And we had a bunch of special guests in the house, including the gentleman on the right there dressed in all black next to Cassidy, who's jumping around and doing the chicken dance, was none other than Mr. Otis Day himself. Joined us to sing Shout with us as we danced to the fraternity party scene on screen. That's something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life right there. That was one of the coolest things I've ever done. And he was such a sweetheart. He was so nice, and he wants to come back to Klamath. He said that he had such a great time at the film festival that he wants to come back next year. So we are already talking about what's the best thing that we can do to maybe have Otis Day and the Knights perform in Klamath. And maybe we also had Dick Peterson from the band The Kingsmen, the group that did Louie Louie in the 60s, was also there. And so we thought, so we're having preliminary conversations, what about partnering with Cruise of Klamath? And since they usually bring in like a band to play early 60s songs, well, what if we have Otis Day and the Kingsmen play at the Raglan as part of a 60s sock hop at a time with a classic car show in town? So the wheels,
That would be awesome.
The wheels are starting to turn to make that happen. So Otis wants to come back, and we're going to try to bring him back. So TBD on all of that coming together. Then we also Friday night had a cast reunion with a bunch of the actors from National Lampoon's Animal House, which was tons of fun. So there's me on stage dressed as Belushi from the "They Took the Bar" scene. And then just to my left shoulder, so middle screen at the bottom, is Mark Metcalf. He played Doug C. Niedermeyer. If you remember Animal House, the brutal sadistic jerk in the film, the epically bad ROTC guy from Animal House. That's Mark Metcalf, and some of the extras and other actors were around there. We also auctioned off an actual piece of the Delta House that Catherine Wilson had donated. The house itself was torn down in the early 80s, but they were kind enough to salvage a piece for us. And actually, one of the actors from the film ended up being the highest bidder. So Joe Abbott, who played an extra in the film, gave the highest bid to walk away with an actual piece of the Delta House to go into his personal collection. And so with that, I wanted to open it up for those of you that were able to attend, or those of you who have attended in the past, for any sort of feedback. Like, what can we do to make it better? What were your overall thoughts on the festival? What are things we did well, things we did poorly, things that we might be able to change going forward, different themes, different panel discussions, good, bad, whatever. We would love any sort of feedback on things that we can do to make the Klamath Independent Film Festival a better overall film experience. So anyone in-house or anyone online wants to chime in, by all means.
I just want to say, I thought it was great how personal everything was. I really like the idea that you guys have the statues that are personalized to the films and stuff. I've never seen that before, so it was really cool because you guys, it shows a level, I mean, of like heart, I guess, for you guys to really like show how much you appreciate their work to have someone else do something of great work. I don't know, I thought it was
Mm.
very, very nice. I loved how friendly everybody was, and because I mean, I've been to the Portland Film Festival and it's a lot different. You guys are just, it feels a little bit different, has a nice atmosphere. I really liked it.
Thank you. That's our focus. We don't get a lot of locals, honestly, from Klamath coming out to our film festival. There's not a lot of interest in Klamath among the local population. But because we are the Made in Oregon Film Festival, we only show Made in Oregon films. It draws filmmakers from all over the state to Klamath. And so it's really a film festival for filmmakers. And we try not to take ourselves too seriously. We're not too highbrow. We try to make it fun. We try to put in a lot of little touches to make the filmmakers feel like we care and that we care about their film and we care about them and we want them to have a good experience. We try to make it a very chill, low-key event where everyone can meet everyone and network and mingle. And it's not just about like at Portland International Film Festival, it's really just everyone going around like, come see my film. It's showing at this time. Come see my film. Come see my film. Come see my film. You're just trying to promote as big of an audience for your thing. And what I like about our festival is that we create a supportive vibe where everyone by the end of it is buddies. And they're just like, hey, your film was awesome. Hey, I liked your film too. You know, maybe they want to go off and work on something together. So it's a very different atmosphere from a lot of film festivals that are a part of. And that's a very conscious effort. So I appreciate, Nina, that you recognize that. Anyone else have?
Well, I also
feedback or-
volunteer, I volunteer with the Portland Film Festival too, so I see how they do things. So I know how it works and it's completely different. But you're right, you guys are very personal and that makes a huge difference because the camaraderie is important in film. Helping each other out, working together, and I think that's huge. And that's what I felt with everyone there because everyone was so, hey, I really liked your film, and they critiqued each other, and I thought that was really good.
That's exactly our goal, is that people walk away feeling that, like, let's just not feel pressured to have to promote our film heavily. Let's just hang out and watch a bunch of great films and get a chance to know all the filmmakers. And by the end of it, hopefully everyone is on friendly terms and want to stay in contact afterwards. It's a great networking activity. Anyone else have thoughts on the film fest or things that we could do even better?
Great films are really important, and I think something that would do Klamath Film very well is to put an emphasis on quality. And if something that is put forth in front of the public that is not of the best possible quality, it shouldn't be put forth in front of the public. It will not do Klamath Film well if things that are put out are not of the best quality that we do. And clearly the film festival does well with that. I was part of the original judging of over 70 films.
Yeah, it's a lot to go through.
It was, and it got down to the best. And I don't want to put down anything that I've seen that was not of superior quality at this point. But I have some things. I have seen some things that were not wonderful. And that can only hurt Klamath Film when the public sees those.
We've talked about reducing the total number of films that we accept because ultimately we limit our total draw based on what people are producing around the state. And it can only be stuff that was produced in state, right? So we have to go by what people are making in Oregon. And we have a specific submission window that people can submit their work. And we hope that the stuff that we get is great. But that's also why we have the screening process and the judging process to try to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. Because we do get some stuff that is outright garbage. It is, and it's almost comical how terrible it is, right? But that's why we have folks like you, Howard, that take the time to watch every single submission, submit your scores. And there's also times where you may love something, the next person hates it. And you know, personal opinion and personal perspective. That's why we have a lot of people watch different things, because what I like may be totally different from what you like, and that's great. That's okay, you know. At the same time, too, we have made a conscious effort to try to not just look at strictly what had the biggest budget, but like we've turned down films that were big budgets, but if the heart and creativity wasn't there, but there was a lot of money involved, do we really want that in? And we've taken films that were shot with a cell phone, but there was something unique and special about it, even though maybe the sound wasn't great and the picture probably wasn't great, there was something there that was that made it what we thought was better than everything else. But and then every single year, be glad you're not a part of our selection committee. We have about a 6-hour long Zoom call one weekend in July every year where we debate every single film and re-rank all the scores. And then ultimately there's 1 or 2 films that someone may really love, but they don't know why the scores were so low. And it's like right on the cusp of, can we fit it in? Can we not fit it in? And every year there's like 2 or 3 films like, it kills me, but there's no space for that film.
But the films that made the cut on the film festival were all good, very good.
I'm glad to hear that.
No criticism there. And without naming anything in particular, I've seen some other things on the website and elsewhere that were put forth by Klamath Film that, in my opinion, would be better had they not been seen shown.
Yeah, I mean, it's personal opinions, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like if everyone has an opinion and like we got overwhelmingly positive feedback, but we had one person who has just been trashing us for weeks all up and down social media. They never wanted to come and actually talk to us face to face about it, but they took it to a public forum to call for a boycott of us because we had the audacity to welcome 2 police officers to our stage for a panel discussion on Sunday. And the reason for it was, we had 6 films about Indigenous issues. We had 2 films about Black culture. We had an all Asian American film. We had multiple films about environmental issues, but in their mind, that doesn't matter because of the great insult of welcoming police officers to talk about police related issues on our stage. In their mind, the exact words that they used was, how can you promote inclusiveness while welcoming police officers? And my thought was, well, so you're saying the only way you can be inclusive is by excluding people because of their career? But that's where their mindset was at. But the reason why we had them was we had 2 documentary films about PTSD. One was about veterans experiences and one was about first responders. And so we had a firefighter and we had the chief of police and we had the sergeant who is the PTSD peer support lead for peer support PTSD programs for police and fire in Klamath to come up and talk about their experiences and the programs that are available and what support is needed, which I thought was a very viable conversation. And my response is, well, okay, if we can't have the PTSD peer support lead talk about PTSD amongst first responders, who would you want to have that conversation with?
Very well.
But for whatever reason, we have someone who hates us now because we had the audacity to welcome 2 police officers to the stage.
It's a shame you asked to be public and you can't just.
I can tell you, I
Yeah,
can tell you straight away that they will not like the last film I acted in. Who was it? 5 or 6 actual Klamath County deputies, and 2 on one shoot or one location, and 2 Klamath Falls police officers, and 2 Klamath Falls or Klamath County. No, it was Chiloquin EMTs. So they're not going to like that film.
yeah. I mean, I thought the films were really interesting. It was kind of a depressing conversation. Obviously, we watched 2 films about PTSD and they have like a 40-minute conversation about PTSD. So I specifically programmed like our super happy, upbeat, lighthearted films to immediately follow that because like we need a palate cleanser. But I thought it went well. But that was so far the only negative feedback that we've gotten from our film festival this year was this one person who was just outraged that we would have police officers on stage. I think that they're so caught up in the inclusiveness mindset that the idea that you have to exclude people to be inclusive is a little is a little odd, but you know, if that's where they're at, I appreciate them coming to the festival. Hopefully they come again some other time in the future. I see our featured guest joined us. Hi, James. How are you?
There, did I unmute? Hey, how's it going?
Hey, thank you for being here.
Me.
We were just discussing, so we just had, so James Westby is our guest. And James is a filmmaker who actually had a film in our festival in 2020. He made a feature-length documentary called At the Video Store, but I know that's not the only project that you've made. We'll get a chance to get a sense of your career and kind of some of the things you've done and any advice you want to offer or odd stories from film sets. It's a very casual conversation that we have at this, James. But we just had our film festival, our 2022 film festival just happened about 2 weeks ago. And so we were just kind of reviewing what we did at that and some of the films that we had. I know you weren't able to attend in person in 2020, but you at least virtually were able to be a part of it. So maybe just real quick, your memories of the 2020 Film Fest being a part of a Klamath Independent Film Festival.
I'm shocked that it was 2 years. That means it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know time flies when we're in a global pandemic, right?
Indeed. I did not, obviously I was not there live, but it was nice to do a Q&A. I think it was a Q&A right after the screening, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, yeah.
That was fantastic. That was the first time I'd ever done a Zoom like Q&A. And I've been to the Bend, we had our premiere at Bend the year before in 2019. And I've been to Bend as a moderator of Q&As since then. And that festival is slowly getting on its feet as far as, doing a little bit of hybrid programming. Is that what you guys are doing as well?
Yeah. So starting in 2020, we were actually in 2020 and 2021, the only film festival in the entire country that was able to welcome an in-theater audience.
Gotcha.
Because Klamath's COVID numbers were low enough, we were able to get special permission from the state and work with the theater to block off rows and space things out and sanitize. It was a limited audience, but still everyone else was online watching from their couch, and we were able to actually have screenings on the big screen, which was quite a treat. And we figured out in 2020, the year that you were part of it, how to actually do that, how to live stream everything on stage and then make it available as an on-demand. And like, how does that even work? It was a week of pulling adapters and cables and thinking, well, if we plug this into this, will that then lead to this? And no, that doesn't work. What if we try this adapter instead? And eventually we figured out how to make it work. And then everyone picked up from what Klamath did and ran with it. So this year we were back in the theater again, had great attendance this year compared to the last couple when we had restrictions, but we continue to do the online side so people could still watch from home.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was especially nice for me because I had a little tiny bit of a run at all the Alamo Drafthouse theaters, starting in Brooklyn, and then it played in, I think there's one in North Carolina, and I went to the one in downtown Los Angeles, and then the pandemic was pretty much like right around March of 2020 is when that all ended, and there were a couple other festivals, including the Sebastopol Documentary Festival that I had gotten into and really wanted to go, and of course it got shut down. As did several others right after that. But Sebastopol is in Northern California, and it's a very, I mean, I know filmmakers and have seen the films that have played there in the past. And it was especially kind of a bummer for that one to go away, having gotten in. And Florida was the same thing later. I think they did have a festival, but it was great to end the year with your guys' festival.
Well, thank you.
And you also gave an awesome poster, which I have framed of my movie.
Your poster is framed and hanging in my office, actually.
Say that again.
That same 24 by 36 that we sent your way is framed and hanging in my office at work as well. So I look at the video store every day.
It's the only full-size poster that I have of my movie.
So let's jump into introductions so that our guest can get to know all of us. We're all pretty familiar. This is some of our regular crowd. With these meetings, James, we never know if we're going to have 20 people or 3 people. It just kind of, it's an open forum for people to join and come in. But our organization, the film festival is just one aspect of what we do. We're a 501c3 based in Klamath Falls that it does film liaison work, and it's a networking group for filmmakers, actors, and just film fans to get together once a month. So that's basically what these meetings are, is to hear about upcoming events or things that just happened, cast and crew calls, and then every month we bring in someone from the industry to come and talk about what they do and what they've done. And if anyone has any questions or funny stories, we just kind of let it roll with whatever we do. So first of all, I'm sure everyone knows me, but hi, I'm Kurt Lidke. I am the board chair for Klamath Film, former executive director. I am a filmmaker and videographer for Klamath Community College. I'm a commercial drone pilot for both aerial and underwater. Also licensed private pilot, and I teach the annual film camp that Klamath Film puts on. And I am very, very exhausted and could use a break after 7 months of work towards the 10th annual film festival that just happened 2 weeks ago. But it was a great time, wonderful. Got to show a lot of wonderful films. I'm very happy with how the film festival went.
That's
All right,
great.
Joyce, want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Joyce Dickens. I'm a independent photographer and artist here in Klamath Falls, member of Klamath Art Association, 2-year member of Klamath Film, and very happy to be in Klamath Falls. We've been here for about 3.5 years now, and really enjoyed the film festival. Last year, we were there for all 3 days and photographed it. This year, we could only attend on Friday, and it seemed like we missed the best part. And yeah, I'm going to be looking at a lot of online stuff. I think YouTube videos that you post.
So all of our panel discussions and Q&As are now on our YouTube channel.
Yeah,
So you can
I
go back and
saw a
watch
lot
those.
come up, but I didn't have the time
Yeah.
yet to look at them. But yeah, we're going to go through them. So yeah.
Howard Stapleton retired after 30 years with public television in Hollywood. As a documentary photographer, among a few other things. So that was the best of my work. The most fun was shooting, making documentaries, long form docs for public television.
Hi, I'm Billy Jo Wallaker. I'm a digital media student out at KCC. This is just me first delving into the film community. I've always wanted to be involved, but just never did. I've always loved documenting. I've traveled a lot. Grew up as a military brat. My mom was always taking photos, documenting, big clunker camera on her shoulder back in the day. So I definitely caught that bug, but I want to be able to put something together like a documentary, or I just want to be able to be more professional and precise. And I am a Coast Guard veteran. I have a commercial pilot's license, but I am being treated for PTSD, so that was like, oh, I would love that. But so yeah, so I'll be along for at least the term, and then hopefully for the future. I just moved to Klamath right when COVID started, so I've got a lot of exploring left to do.
There's also a mic up front here too, Billy Joy, if you don't want to be passing a mic back and forth. It's totally up to you. Wayne, why don't you introduce yourself?
Wayne Sweat, I'm an actor, produced and directed some very low budget films. I've only been acting for, well, I would say 12 years, but 2 of them were lost to COVID. Been in about 40 different productions, whether on stage and theater, live acts, short films, feature films, what have you. Before I forget, Kurt, you mentioned a film or somebody that needed a sound person
Yes.
for a feature film, Jeffrey Grellman.
Yes.
If you would like to see anybody is interested at all, that you can go onto Amazon.com or Amazon Prime, even YouTube, and watch his last feature film, Mermaid Down. It's excellent. I just watched it again the other night. And if you do end up doing that, being the sound person, I'll meet you on set or location.
Yeah, his film, he's another filmmaker who spent a lot of time in LA and just recently moved to the Klamath area. And this is, I believe, his first film project he's working on since coming to town.
That's quite a culture shock going from Los Angeles to Klamath Falls.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's.
But
it's
he's
a big change.
incredibly talented.
Mhm.
Very, very talented.
Yeah, you know, the crazy thing is when I left Hollywood, I had a job opportunity to get into journalism. And I thought I had applied for a job in Lake Oswego. So I was thinking I could go from Santa Monica, Hollywood to the Portland suburbs. You know, I can make that happen. It was actually Lakeview that I had applied for. Which, James, you probably aren't aware of. It's a little teeny tiny crossroads cow town about 100 miles east of Klamath. It has a Subway sandwich shop, but that's about it. And
There,
You sneeze when you're going through it, you'll miss sorry.
when you pause there, you said they have a Subway. I'm like, oh, they have a Subway system.
no, they have a Subway sandwich shop. So I went from Santa Monica area, like 50 restaurants in just my neighborhood alone, to the restaurant, and being surrounded by a bunch of like multi-generational cattle ranches, because I thought in the middle of the night when I applied for a job that Lakeview was Lake Oswego before I went to bed at like 3 a.m. And that's the long story of how I ended up in Klamath Falls. Was I got eventually the newspaper there, newspaper here owned by the same company, so I got transferred over. But yeah,
I've had some bad Mexican food and then driven through Lakeview, and I can fart from one end of town to the other. That's what it is.
yeah, on a good day, the population is maybe 2,000 people, if that.
Yeah.
And it's like a little oasis out in the middle of vast Eastern Oregon high desert. So you think Klamath Falls is a culture shift, James? I went from Hollywood to Lakeview and had this existential crisis. What the F just happened? Like, how did I end up here? But making the best of it.
Yeah, when I lived in LA, I moved there from Bellingham, Washington,
Mhm.
which is, probably bigger than Klamath Falls population wise. It's about 15 miles from the Canadian border.
Yep.
And then when I lived there the first time I moved back to Bellingham. So that's something of, getting to know a big city and then living in a really tiny town again.
I always know Bellingham for their single A minor league baseball.
Yeah. Yep, I used to go to those games. I only lived there. I lived there like 10 different times. Maybe not 10, maybe 7 different times. But yeah, I remember that team and those games for sure.
My first job was working for the Eugene Emeralds single A baseball team. And so Bellingham was one of the regulars that they always played against. So
Yeah. The Portland Pickles are big here now.
yeah.
My team. They have a huge following. Have you seen the documentary about the Portland Mavericks?
Yeah, the battered bastards of baseball
Yes.
on Netflix, which I highly recommend. It is an awesome. I'm sure everyone knows the famous actor Kurt Russell. He and his dad ran a minor league baseball team in Portland in the 70s before he became a famous actor. And so there's about an hour-long documentary all about this independent baseball team that started in Portland. It's on Netflix. It's incredible. Check it. It's very funny.
It might be like even over 90 minutes if I recall.
Okay. If it is, it's a fast 90 because it feels like there should be more meat to the bone of this story, but it's a wonderful documentary.
It was made by Kurt Russell's dad's grandsons. And then they went on to make the Wild Wild Country documentary.
Very, very fun film. Highly recommend. Battered Bastards of Baseball.
Mhm.
Nina, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Nina Oberlin. I work kind of trying to get a studio started. I do production design, a little bit of cinematography, mostly animation, some live action, just kind of getting my feet wet. Just graduated from school, so just kind of getting my feelers out there. Got a couple projects coming up, and just I don't know. I just joined Klamath Film as a member this year, so it's been nice getting to know new people and getting to be a part of like other people that are interested in film, being able to talk about it more often. So it's been really nice.
The best thing is finding your movie nerd people that you can geek out with.
Yes, exactly.
We definitely have a lot of geeks in our group, so. And Andrew is our newest member, just moved to Klamath, actually. Introduce yourself, please, sir.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for permitting me to be on audio only. I am very new to Klamath Falls, but one of the reasons that drew me to the area was the Klamath Independent Film Festival. I just came here from Spokane, where I was a board member of the Spokane International Film Festival and the Spokane Falls Film Festival. I am a filmmaker and producer, and I kind of work in the international genre and horror worlds. My most recent film, Polium Blastema, from director Elias Marriage, that I executive produced, just premiered at the Philadelphia Opera Film Festival. And my next feature is going to be coming out at the London Fright Fest Halloween Fest, which is going to be on October 29th, which we're all very excited for. But I'm just really thankful to be here. And I had a total blast at the Klamath Independent Film Festival this last weekend, or just a couple of weeks ago, because time has been flying so fast. And it's been great meeting everyone. And I have to echo just how incredible of a community it is here that I'm getting just integrated into, with so many filmmakers and everyone celebrating Oregon filmmaking. And it's just been fantastic group of people to get to know. So I'm very thankful to be here.
Well,
Thank you.
Andrew basically pulled into town and came straight to our film festival before you even had a chance to unpack. And he is now had such
Yeah,
a
I'm still unpacking.
yeah, still unpacking. And he had such a good time at the film festival that he is now the newest member of the tech team at Ross Raglan Theater. So congrats, Andrew, on joining our arts community and helping to produce a lot of live arts that will be happening here going forward.
Do we have any open positions on the board?
We
Yes,
do, and
and
I've
I
already
have
talked to Andrew
a
about
board
that.
application that's coming your way, Kurt. So get ready for that. But again, I couldn't be more thankful to be here at the perfect time for the whole involvement of just where everything is with this group of incredible filmmakers and everyone who's a part of what I feel like one of the most exciting film groups in the entirety of the West Coast, especially on the other end of lockdowns and everything that we've been going through the last couple of years. I was living in Culver City earlier this year, and I was bouncing between Spokane and Southern California. And it's funny you mentioned this, James, because I'm good friends with everyone at the Bleedingham Horror Festival up in Bellingham, Washington. So I'm just, well traveled around all of the West Coast film communities. And I really do genuinely feel like where we are here in the Klamath Basin is one of the greatest budding film communities of the entirety of this part of the world.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah,
Thank you for the kind words. So we have our
And if I may interject,
yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say that Kurt's been a vital part. I was going to say that you, Kurt, have been a vital part in why the group is as good as it is. We've had one person after another that have been building the group, but you're doing a fantastic job. So
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. A check will be written under cover of darkness later.
don't
So-
write, pay cash or something.
Yeah, make it out to cash, right? So our guest tonight, James Westby, has made several feature films and has worked in the industry for quite a while. I'll give him a chance in just a minute to detail some of the more of the film-related work that he's had in his career. But I did load up a trailer that I want to show from his documentary that we included at the 2020 Film Festival, a documentary called At the Video Store, which I find to be a nostalgic, hilarious, fun, and heartfelt look at independent video stores and the slow demise of the mom and pop video store shop as Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and Redbox came in to destroy them, and now they all met their demise. Well, Redbox didn't, but the others fell by the wayside. So James made this wonderful documentary that we showed at the 2020 Film Festival. So I want to show the trailer real quick, and then James, we'll get into some of your career. I never know if the videos that I show, if the audio is going to come through via Zoom, so I apologize, Wayne, James, Nina, and Andrew, if you don't hear this, but at least you'll see it, and it's on YouTube, so you can just search at the video store. And those of you in the house, you may just want to look at my computer instead of.
If there's no sound, I can probably just narrate and just like say all the dialogue.
Okay, well,
I edited the trailer, so I remember it, I think.
here's at the video store.
Maybe look at the biggest, I have all these boxes. You got to say, why we later, you're like, you get yeah, I can hear every night.
Highly recommend checking out at the video store.
Did anybody hear the dialogue from that?
We did in-house. I'm not sure if you did.
I filmed a little bit of that just now because the sound, it was just like, for me, it was just all echoey and like every other word was cut out. It was awesome, just because it was so weird.
Sorry.
I thought it was edited that way.
Well,
I just want the phone number.
I'm glad,
Can I get the phone number of the girl that was sitting on the toilet?
I'm glad if you heard it, but I did not. It was very strange.
So sorry about that, James. It's always weird trying to stream video through Zoom.
Oh yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you. I work.
I was going to say, as the newest member of the Ross Raglan AV team, I can absolutely make sure that we get this nailed down for the next meeting. So no worries, Kurt.
Oh,
I work on a lot of commercials, and as a director and an editor, and I oftentimes have massive technical failure, at least in the last year and a half, 2 years, regarding just showing cuts to about 10 different agency people, and half of them sometimes see it, and half of them get nothing, and it's always hilarious.
Yeah, the joys of when we were all forced to go on Zoom when COVID hit, trying to figure out how to work all this stuff. And now there's all these different software programs that can integrate and talk to each other. So it's like 5 different programs and multiple things running just to make this whole function. And if one of them is acting screwy, it messes everything up. But anyway, hello, James.
Hey.
At the video store is just one of your films. You made another feature called The Auteur, and you've made a couple other films. I know you do a lot of commercial work as well. At the video store really hit all of the feels for me. I grew up with my dad taking me to Flicks and Picks in Eugene all the time as a kid. In the days before IMDb and Google and Rotten Tomatoes, it was all about rolling through aisles at this family-owned video store, looking at VHS box art to determine what we were going to take home that night.
Yep.
And it's now a pet food store, but every time I drive by, it's like, oh man, that was Flicks and Picks. That's where we used to always go.
Yeah,
And so you made this amazing nostalgic film, and we could touch more on that. But first, let's get into kind of your background and how you got into becoming a filmmaker.
okay. Well, first of all, at the video store, it took me 7 years to complete that film. Before that, I'd never made a documentary feature film. I'd only made narrative feature films. And I made six, believe it or not, narrative feature films before I made this scrappy little documentary. And so when I got into the business or got interested in, demystifying the process of filmmaking and taking eventually some 16 millimeter film production and 16 millimeter film editing classes locally here at the Northwest Film Center in Portland, which is why I moved here. Actually, it was kind of also coincided with just being obsessed with the movie Drugstore Cowboy, the Gus Van Sant film, which was shot here. And I kind of took a couple trips down to Portland from, as I said, I lived in Bellingham, Washington. I'm from all over Washington, but it was kind of that movie and that I guess it's a school. I mean, it was part of the Portland Art Museum, and I think it still is. It has a different name now, but I moved to Portland to go to the film center to make, narrative independent films, which I did for decades. Starting with one that I made when I was 20 years old, which was 30 years ago, right when I moved here, as I was taking my first production class. Back then, you got a Kodak film discount, and you got it, the equipment was free if you just, signed up for it and checked it out. And so I made a feature film back in 1993 using the film center's equipment, and just from there just kept doing the same thing for about a good 20 years. Just terrible business plan, being an independent filmmaker and just making a movie as the ideas come to you and as you write a screenplay, and then just putting it out into the world somehow. But I did start out in the film world, which is important, I think, to emphasize, because it's so different than what it's like now. I mean, now I make movies on my iPhone, or I'm making a movie on my iPhone, whereas before it was, even if you shot on video, and I'm talking about 1992, 1993, when I first moved here, if you shot on video back then, you were a joke. Like, it wasn't until maybe 1999 or 2000 where shooting on digital video became an actual feasible medium for filmmakers. For me, it was the movie Chuck and Buck came out, written by Mike White, who now directs that show, The White Lotus, and several films and TV shows. But when that movie played in the theater, it just kind of changed my life, because I realized, oh, you can make tiny budget films with just shit equipment. As long as the writing is good, you can make a good film. And that's not entirely true, but there are elements of what I just said that are definitely true.
The term that I hear often is shot on shitio, which is to describe those early to mid 90s over the shoulder VHS camcorders that parents used to have, thinking that they were the next Scorsese, and filming their kids' baseball game or Christmas time. And you just get that dull, blurred look, because no one knew any of the effects or controls on the camera. You just power it on and hit record, and you end up with this like dull, bad audio, terrible film. But people made movies with that. And now when people look back at it, the term is always, if it was shot on shitio, it has that early 90s VHS look to everything.
Yeah, and they were usually bad because the writing was also bad, in addition to terrible looking video. But it was those movies later on that embraced like digital video and were able to, have a good script, first of all, which is, I think, probably the most important thing in a narrative feature film, is to have a well-written screenplay. It was there were a lot here in Portland, there were a lot of bad sci-fi movies shot on video. They were just doubly awful because of the format. But I did make 3 different films on 16 millimeter, 2 on 16 and 1 on 35 millimeter. That was in 1997, the final movie I made on film. And then after that, just once, you know, those movies like The Celebration, and the aforementioned Chuck and Buck came out in theaters. It just seemed like, oh, now I can make movies that don't have to cost any money. And it's truly, at least, you know, as far as production goes, you know, very democratic.
So you've been a filmmaker for many, many years. I know you do tons of commercial work in the Northwest, a lot of ads, a lot of editing and whatnot, but then you get your occasional creative projects. So what was the ultimate inspiration for wanting to make At the Video Store?
Well, while I was making believe it or not, while I was making all of those low budget narrative films, 6 in total, I was always working at a video store. I worked at 10 different, I counted them up when I was you know, just promoting the film. I worked at 10 different video stores, a couple in California, but most here in Portland. And at about 19, no, actually, I say 19, no, it was around 2004 when I worked at a video store in Alberta here in Portland called Videorama, which is featured in my film. And also, for some reason, the owners decided to open a video store that had a gym built into it, like a workout facility. And when I worked there, I worked at 2 of their different locations, met a lot of friends, a lot of people that ended up working on my later films, in particular a sound designer and a production sound mixer. But not only had I shot a little bit of footage there, like just my friends behind the counter kind of thing, and just had, you know, had become a super film nerd before that, but then just, you know, it was exacerbated by working at all those stores and seeing everything. And, you know, just having, if anything, you know, I just definitely can talk movies, and I don't want to say I have an encyclopedic knowledge of film, but there's definitely a, you know, there's a component of that in my personality and my experience for sure. And all of it was because it's hard not to say the title of my movie while I'm talking, but it's true. At the video store, I had access to everything. It's free, you know, so you're actually making probably $8 an hour, but you're, you know, in terms of experience and movie watching and, you know, in a way learning. And I mean, everybody talks about it being like a film school, which is totally true. It was just, you know, tons of free movies. So in my mind, I was making, I don't know, $30 an hour because of how many movies I took home every night for free.
I mean, there's a definite cultural aspect of that. I mean, Quentin Tarantino took the same path. He worked in video stores for years before he became Tarantino, and just had built up this knowledge from his job. He watched movies all day long and grew this very, and so you see in all of his films, there's always something thematic to it. There's the old Kurosawa samurai aspect, or the old classic Western, or every one of his films is a little nod to a film genre that he watched over and over again when he was working in video rental shops.
Yeah. And I still go to Movie Madness at least every other week. We're lucky here that we actually have a store where you can pretty much, you know, watch any movie that you need to see.
Oregon's kind of keeping that dream alive because, you know, we of course have the very last Blockbuster store in existence in Bend, and now since friend of Klamath Film, Taylor Morden, made his documentary that ended up on Netflix, and actually we showed that at the 2020 Film Festival alongside James's, and that to this day is the only time that film's ever been shown on a big screen in a theater. But it made international headlines, and now the last Blockbuster video store, ironically, I'm sure quite hilariously for you, James, being part of the indie scene, has become like this Mecca landmark that people internationally travel to just to go to Bend to see if Blockbuster still exists. It's like, well, if you're doing that, why not come to the indie store that's in town too? You know,
I'm surprised that more Blockbusters don't start just popping up because of the popularity of that one.
Yeah,
there was one in Alaska for a long time.
Yep.
Yeah, my movie touches on Blockbuster just a little bit because one of my stores that I worked at in the mid 90s, actually literally like in 1995, got taken over by a Blockbuster. They got bought, and I had the Blockbuster shirt on for about a week before I quit. But that was my experience with that particular corporation.
The great irony of Taylor's film was that when he started making it, there were still 10 Blockbuster stores in existence. And he
Oh.
just happened to decide that he was living in Bend at the time and just wanted to make a film about Blockbuster in general, started filming at that, and ended up being the last one that survived. So that's how the name The Last Blockbuster came around. But your film touches on the demise of Hollywood video, demise of Blockbuster video, and there's something in your film, and I pulled some of these just as examples so that we could see some of these, but probably my favorite part of your whole film is when you highlight Ghana painting film posters.
Oh, yeah, the movie poster, sure.
Yeah, can you kind of detail what this is, and then I'll jump through a few examples that I pulled off the internet to show people?
Oh, yeah, that's great. It's like a little PowerPoint. In Chicago, the store doesn't exist, but suddenly there's good news because just a few weeks ago, and I follow all, I mean, I have a bunch of VHS obsessed friends and like people who know everything about every video store. I keep in contact with these people since the movie came out. But in Chicago, and I was going to say this Odd Obsession in Chicago, which is one of my favorite stores that I profiled in that movie. And they closed, but they are out. I'm told they're now coming back. But the owner of that store just started getting into these Ghanaian movie posters, and in the film he describes the origin of that whole kind of art form, which is that these artists would be tasked with making a poster for a film that's coming to a small village in Ghana, and nobody's seen the film. They've only maybe seen the poster or maybe the VHS cover or something. And these artists, it just developed that there were several artists, and now there is several, at least in terms of that small subculture, famous for what they do and sought out, and they do commissions and stuff. But they would make a poster based on kind of what they ascertained the movie to be about, based on maybe some cover art, but sometimes just a description or just like some stills from the film. And they painted them on flour sacks very specifically. I'm not sure if that was already some media that an artist took in Africa and painted on, but that's to make these Ghanaian movie posters what they are. They're painted on flour sacks, and like I just said, the criteria for for making these posters that they've never didn't know anything about the movie, basically, or not everything about the movie. So when you see them, a lot of them, like there's one that sticks out to me, and maybe it's in your slideshow, but for Groundhog Day. And this process, I think it started maybe in the 80s, early 80s, and then continues to this day. But there's one for Groundhog Day, and there's a lot of violent imagery in posters for films that don't have any violence in them, like Groundhog Day. It's really bizarre, and it seems to be informed over like years of just artists making these posters in that fitting that description and for that purpose. And it's just developed these weird little sidebars, if you will, about what they put on those posters. And in my film, the guy collects them and starts selling them. And now he has a business, the Deadly Prey Gallery, I think is the name. Their Instagram is great because they show a picture of one of these posters every day. And in my film, there's a couple of great shots of, I shot the film. My movie's supposed to be scrappy and look like kids made it. We can get into that later, but for the film, The Harder They Come, in my movie, there's a huge, it's enormous. It takes up the whole, like half the wall or something.
So thank you, James, for introducing me to these, because I've gone deep down the rabbit hole online of trying to find these, because I got so intrigued by this artwork of if you were trying to promote a film coming to your town, right? And you want as many people to come out and see it, but you've never seen the film and all you know is the title of it. And maybe you know who's in it, but you really don't know anything about it, but you want it to look exciting and bring people out. How would you paint that, right? And so some of the ones I pulled up just for today, here is E.T., which I don't remember Michael Jackson being in E.T. And I don't remember the face huggers from the film Alien being in E.T.
The other thing is the colonization of other movies and and oftentimes it's another role that same actor has played, but in a different movie, and they'll put that in the poster for another movie. So odd. And those little
So-
pot, those look like something out of Little Shop of Horrors or
Yeah.
the Body Snatchers.
So that's ET. Here's The Godfather, which
I know the posters.
I don't
can't
re-
say
I don't
anything.
remember a 200-pound cat being in Godfather, but
You gotta rewatch.
but that is a good interpretation of Marlon Brando, at least.
Yeah.
Here's Space Jam. Everyone remembers Space Jam. I don't remember a legless Michael Jordan shooting everyone while going to dunk, while a deranged, let's say a squirrel, is also trying to slam dunk at once.
That's the addition of the violence. There's always some gun or like a knife or just a corpse or like a bleeding headless something. So bizarre.
One of my favorite movies from the 90s, and it's a somewhat obscure film, stars Forrest Whitaker, is Ghost Dog: Way of the Samurai, which
Yes,
it is
classic.
a film that does not have any dogs in it, but in this version, the dogs carry machine guns. And it's kind of hard to see, but in the bottom left there, Forrest Whitaker is actually having a sword fight with a dog in a ghost Halloween costume that shoots lasers out of its eyes. Which I kind of want to see. I mean, I'd like to see this version of Ghost Dog: Way of the Samurai.
Jim Jarmusch.
Isn't he like a what do you call it, out of Star Wars? Not a ninja, whatever you call it. You know what I'm talking-
Jedi?
Jedi.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, it's been a while since I saw Ghost Dog, but I don't remember there being any dogs in Ghost Dog. But there are now. Here is The Hobbit. I mean, everyone remembers Peter Jackson's The Hobbit and the women in bikinis that go around decapitating people while there's skeletons dancing around them. I mean, that's such an iconic scene from The Hobbit, right?
That's a perfect poster for that movie.
Yeah, and then the best one that I found, family friendly, 90s favorite, Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, and then of course you remember the scene when Kevin Spacey is somehow adding leverage to Mrs. Doubtfire's foot so that Mrs. Doubtfire can shove a broom through someone's skull and completely.
Oh yeah, that was the conclusion of the film, right?
Yeah, I think this is the alternative ending, and for some reason wearing like 17th century like genie shoes. So there's just a few examples of these Ghana film paintings. If you want to have some fun, just do a Google search for that, and there's hundreds of these paintings that people have made to promote films that are coming to Africa. James highlights a few of them in his films, so thank you, James, for bringing that to my attention, because I've had a lot of fun with those.
Yeah, I learned about it when I filmed that, dude, and that did not look like Kevin Spacey. No offense to that. When you said that, I'm like,
Really, you don't think that that's Kevin Spacey in the corner giving some added leverage for Mrs. Doubtfire to really impale?
he looks more like an aging like Squiggy from Lenny and Squiggy, or something.
Just grabbing the wrong body member to properly represent Kevin Spacey.
I think that's a deleted scene on the Blu-ray, is that this scene where Mrs. Doubtfire plunges a broom through someone's skull.
See, I was gonna say maybe that might be Stanley Tucci, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to think who might be getting the broom through the eye, and I'm thinking about an 80s sitcom. The guy goes, "Hey," but
Yeah, I was thinking it's
Tony Danza. Maybe
it's
that's
Tony Danza
Danza
getting a
in the
broom through
jeans.
the eyeball.
I don't know. That might be Stanley Tucci and Tony Danza. But regardless, one of my favorite Ghana posters. If anyone checks it out, look up the Tango and Cash.
Oh
my
yeah,
all-time
I
favorites.
almost pulled that one. Yeah, it's the
So
Jack
good.
Burton character from Big Trouble in Little China alongside Cobra.
Cobra.
Yeah, so it's Sylvester Stallone's Cobra character and Kurt Russell's Jack Burton character from Big Trouble in Little China, while there's monster trucks in the background going off of jumps.
You know, what's funny is I saw a post last night, I think it was, about a movie a feature that's going to be shot over in the Rogue Valley that is going to be starring one person we just saw. And I thought, there's no way I would get close enough that I could shake hands with that person. You know, I'm not. Never mind.
Yeah. You might think different if they pick up a broom.
Well, no, not that person, the one grabbing the shoe.
Oh, right.
I'm not getting that close.
Does anyone have
It's
any questions for James here, or anything that they wanna ask? Otherwise, just kind of him and I bullshitting about about movies we like.
We can just talk about movies all night. That'd be fine with me.
Yeah.
I would love to chime in with a question if I can.
Oh, Andrew, yeah.
Yeah, James, what do you think about the ongoing appreciation and nostalgia for the video and VHS era? And one of the reasons why I asked this is I had been attached to a documentary series that now in its third part has really dove into genre VHS releases and the video store culture and going through the horror section and sci-fi and just that whole Friday night, we've got discounts and a couple of pizzas and we're gonna get tapes for the weekend. What are your thoughts on everyone looking back on how important that was 30 some years ago and everyone really reliving and loving that whole period?
Yeah, I think it's funny because a lot of people, every once in a while you hear people talk about bookstores and wasn't it nice when there were bookstores? And my reaction to that is always there are bookstores everywhere. Like there's so many bookstores. Like in Portland and just how many do you have in Klamath Falls?
Two. Yeah, there's Campus Back Books, Space and Book Trader.
You know, that's obviously they're not the, you know, the amount of bookstores that there were back in, you know, back in the day, but the video store experience is never ever going to return to what it was. So I think the disparity there definitely enhances folks's, you know, like literal nostalgia for those periods. I'm lucky here that I get to keep experiencing that, even though I'm a terrible renter. And I think that the, you know, everybody knows that the business plan for that was flawed from the get-go, actually, at least for the consumer, taking something and having to return it, which for me, I keep movies forever. And I end up, I think I put Movie Bandits, I helped them out a lot, like in terms of paying their mortgage or whatever, because my late fees are astronomical. But I'm always inspired by the nostalgia and the, you know, the, I mean, you know, like Stranger Things and things like that, obviously are at the forefront of probably in terms of influencing the most, let's say, children who have no idea what video stores are. You know, that's a way to, I think, like trigger in a young child or somebody who didn't have that experience, what that's like, and that it's not just, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
taking the care to, you know, either stumble across something that you didn't know existed, which is possible on streaming, but it's not the same thing, as I think everybody probably agrees. And being able to talk to a person, you know, versus an algorithm telling you what you probably might like. I mean, those are the base kind of ideas within probably any video store movie that would ever come out, I think. And I think that's what makes it hard. And then there are several other, you mentioned something that I think you're working on or that's being made. There are so many, I mean, there's even a series on Netflix being made called called Blockbuster. That's about the last Blockbuster. It's not about the one in Bend, but it's just about that concept of the last one that exists. And I think it premieres in November or something.
Yeah.
So there is all sorts of video store nostalgia, but because I never really left that you know, that lifestyle of going into the store, usually because I worked at Videorama, which stuck around till probably, I think it finally went out of business in 2015. But I kept going there and of course, I was getting free rentals because my friends worked there still. That might have changed a little bit, and I was still late with returning them, and I paid the late fees, so I might as well have got them for free. But I do like the, you know, at least the talking about and the remembering of those old days. But I can't see it because of the because of the inconvenience. I don't ever see it returning the way a record store has returned. It's a different thing. It's you're renting something, a piece of plastic, and bringing it back. That's not sales. I mean, record stores are sales. You're buying records, and you're selling your used records back to them, and they're selling them. It's this other, completely other business model that's worked for years and will continue to work as long as people keep being into vinyl. But also another component of that I think you mentioned was the VHS community. For my movie, they were like the most helpful in getting it out there and being supportive, and again, like keeping in contact with me. And I've become sort of a VHS junkie since making the movie and meeting those people. Not playing them on VCRs as much as just having them on certain shelves in my house.
There's something to be said about that, though, of this desire culturally that has been growing in the last couple of years to return to analog content. I mean, we're sitting in a vinyl record store right now.
Oh, nice.
Retro video games from the 80s and 90s are suddenly hugely popular again. I'm a Laserdisc collector, as well as VHS, and I love old audio cassettes as well. And yeah, the quality is not as good as what you can find, in digital formats, but that's kind of the charm. And what's interesting, since Jimmy opened up this shop about a year ago, is that a lot of his customer base are teenagers and early 20-somethings that are just getting into buying records for the first time. And there's kind of this cultural shift of wanting to reconnect to the older analog formats. I don't know if maybe there's just a fad and there's going to be a crest to it, but people that you wouldn't think have that nostalgic connection are wanting to connect with things that they never experienced because they're not old enough to have experienced when it was actually the thing, but
they're maybe the biggest consumers of that stuff too.
Yeah.
It's strangely analogous to I used to be a skateboarder before I got into movies. That's all I cared about was skateboarding. And skateboarding is another thing now. It's like it's amazing. Like the skaters today do the most amazing tricks. But I have a cinematographer friend who's also my favorite drone operator. His son is a skater, and they all make videos all the time, but they use like high 8 cameras that people were using in the early 90s with these fisheye lenses. Like, what are you doing? You could use your iPhone and it'll look way better. But they're like, no, I like this, they like the look.
Yeah. It's interesting how culturally all of that has come around, but there's an important aspect to those old mom and pop video stores, those few that are still lingering. And that is the fact that right now, everyone thinks of the convenience, right? Like we've got Netflix, we've got Amazon Prime, we've got Hulu, we've got all these streaming services. So what's the need of having DVDs or physical things? But there's so many films that are not on streaming services, classic films, more obscure films. And some of those are, but they're buried, you have to actively search for them to find them on those streaming services. But now today, without these stores kind of hanging on, if you're a real film buff and you remember maybe seeing something in the 80s, you can't quite remember what it was, but you want to check it out again. If it's not on a streaming service, it's like it never existed. Without places like Movie Madness that have that random VHS copy of that weird early 80s B-movie horror slasher film that you want to see because maybe a YouTube video was made about it that you came across. You're like, oh, I should check that out sometime. But it's not on any streaming service. It's like the movie never even existed without these rental stores existing to kind of keep it alive somehow. And that's also ties in with the whole VHS collecting community too. You're a part of, James, of like trying to preserve this.
Yeah, unless
as you know, I'm trying to settle my parents' estate. I've got probably 500 movies in here on DVD and VHS and old stuff you never find anywhere else. But the person could watch movies until they died. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it's possible some of that stuff is a gold mine. Some of those things might be never on Blu-ray, never on streaming, never on 4K, and never picked up by any other distributors and lost to time. So there may be a couple of movies that treasure hunters may really be looking for in that collection.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there was, at a time, there was like something like movies made before 1980 on Netflix, there were like 20 films or something. And when you think about just the, just the ratio of actual movies that are available to watch in some format versus what's on a given popular streaming site, it's crazy.
Well, and I don't know how it is for like commercially produced film, but I have such an appreciation for film, like analog film, because I can still see my parents' wedding from back in the 60s, 70s, I think. But I can't access my own files from like a decade ago because the format, like I took my stuff to computer store and they're like, nope, sorry, you just can't see it anymore.
Yeah.
What the heck? I can see stuff from the 60s, 50s, 70s, but not from 10 years ago because it's digital, everything changes
Right.
so much, so fast.
Yeah, yeah. And if you don't have a video store, the second best thing to do is just build up your collection and just buy DVDs.
Yeah.
Thrift stores are amazing for finding old VHS tapes.
Yeah.
I part of the reason why I'm such a huge film buff is my dad was a huge fan of old classic black and white movies. And so growing up, I was force-fed watching TNT and AMC and Turner Classic Movies back when they actually showed old movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s. I feel like I've seen every silent film and film from the 30s and 40s that hasn't degraded to the point of being lost forever at some point in my life. But and at the time I was like, why do I have to sit through this? And now I have, I love Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton and all that. But someone's like, can I watch like cartoons or something? But now almost all of those channels that used to keep all those films alive, now AMC doesn't show old Humphrey Bogart films. They show The Walking Dead and reality TV shows. I mean, the History Channel is nothing but reality TV. They don't even show documentaries anymore about history. And so we've also kind of lost on a lot of the streaming services and cable television this appreciation for the classics and keeping the classics alive. So it's kind of further degraded the understanding of film history and classic iconic films and film preservation. So people like James, who makes these films that profile video stores, and collectors who avidly go out and try to make sure that I'm going to make sure that, whatever your individual subgenre may be. I know there's people who are diehard about collecting 70s and 80s slasher horror films. Like they want to make sure all those old classics are preserved somehow. Yeah, like Wayne's got a picture of Casablanca there. Like people, I guess you have to be of a certain age, but for me, I'm born in 79, child of the 80s and early 90s. We had 35 channels, not 3,500 channels, and so we watched a lot of black and white movies growing up, and my dad force-fed me all those. But now I have such a great appreciation for that. But so now, like my girlfriend today, her teenage son, he doesn't give a crap about Casablanca or Maltese Falcon, or doesn't know who Charlie Chaplin is, and couldn't possibly care less about that because he's got Netflix and 5,000 channels and PlayStation in front of him. And hey, I love those things too, but there's like this loss of appreciation for the art form and anything that's older than a decade. And so folks like James are doing their part to try to keep the art form's history alive a little bit. So I appreciate, James, your efforts in being like me, a bit of a movie hoarder, but doing it for preservation's sake too, right?
Sure thing. All those places you mentioned too, TCM is really the only one still keeping that alive. I watched AMC also, especially in the early 90s. And they released those Buster Keaton shorts that nobody had ever, literally, like Sherlock Jr. and a couple others, people had never seen before, unless they were on some bootleg or they had seen them in a theater. So AMC used to be a completely different animal. It was the best. Like literally, I learned everything about classic cinema, Billy Wilder's films, Howard Hawks, all the classic, 40s and 50s directors. And beyond that, I don't know when AMC at that time kind of cut off the classic movie era, probably right before the 70s, maybe. Although later they started showing like Chinatown and some of the great 70s films. But TCM is kind of the only one keeping that going, and I don't have cable, but I definitely watch the TCM. They have like a curated sub channel on HBO Max, which is kind of nice. And I catch up with some old things there, or see things that I'd never seen before, and some of them are pretty obscure, both American classic films and foreign films. A lot of Italian cinema that I'd never seen before. I watched on HBO Max via their TCM Turner Classic Movies sub channel. So that's kind of, but that's like one outlet. None of the other ones. There is a streaming service called Fandor, which I think went out of business sort of, and they maybe have a channel on Amazon now. It's Fandor, and they had my movie, which was called Film Geek. I made another movie about video stores years ago about a character who obviously is film geek, and but they had that on there, and that kind of made me, at least introduced me to that channel, and they still exist, and it's just a lot of really great obscure, a lot of really strange, obtuse kind of American art films. And not that my movie Film Geek is an American art film at all. It's like just a dorky comedy. But that channel is one of those that feels almost like a curated video store, along with the TCM thing on HBO Max. But I don't know. I don't have actual cable, so I never watch the real Turner Classic Movies anymore. But I'm glad that it still exists, because people are still talking about it. It's still a brand, and it's showing a lot of great movies that whose hosts know what they're talking about when they introduce them, kind of thing.
Surprisingly, there's also on YouTube a lot of old silent films that have been uploaded, and
Yeah.
a lot of old black and white films there as well. You have to dig for it, of course, but that's where I saw the 1906 version of Wizard of Oz was on YouTube. That's where
Sometimes I have to speak stuff out on YouTube and Vimeo sometimes, because I think it's more of it's more of a nerdier filmmaker friendly platform. There are a lot of have stuff that is uploaded, and sometimes you watch it, I can't believe I'm watching this, because it's not available anywhere.
You can go down the rabbit hole with a lot of low budget and B movies from the 60s and 70s, and very interesting films that may have been in and out of theaters if they ever got into a theater at all. But they're fully uploaded on YouTube as a way to preserve them that would otherwise be completely forgotten, because that's stuff that's never going to show up on Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it even counts for more recent films that whose music rights got weird. There's a movie about the singer-songwriter Townes Van Zandt called "Be Here to Love Me" that I love. It's just an amazingly edited and just beautiful poetic masterpiece of a documentary that I had on DVD, and I lent it to somebody, and they borrowed it, and I don't know who it was, and I've never gotten it back. And I was looking for it just to buy it on Amazon or something, which I've bought a few movies on Amazon. American Movie being one of them that's really hard to find on any physical media format. But every once in a while I'll do that. But anyway, it wasn't even available on there because I think of a couple of music rights issues. But I ended up just Googling it, and it's on some weird site, but you can watch the whole movie full frame on your laptop for free.
Anyone else have questions for James here, or a topic you want to bring up for discussion?
Just a general question for anyone regarding a documentary which I saw only once, a very long time ago, that I would love to see again. It's produced by the BBC, took place in a small village in Italy, and it documented how the women of the village would harvest the spaghetti. It was absolutely priceless piece of work, done completely seriously. The women would plant, nurture, and then harvest the spaghetti.
That sounds like that's a Google search away. I want to see that movie, but I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I remember seeing Ripley's Believe It or Not once, Spaghetti Trees, but that's probably the photograph of spaghetti trees. That's the closest thing that I would know of that. Anyone who hasn't had a chance to chime in yet? Nina or Joyce, so you haven't had a chance to chime
I
in
have
on
a question. Well, actually, I was looking over your IMDb, James, and I really was looking at the Rid of Me.
Mhm.
I'm just curious what your inspiration was for that. It's a little bit different from the other stuff that you've done. So,
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the movie that I made that probably had the most. I mean, it premiered at Tribeca Film Festival, so it immediately had just a kind of a big, huge kind of PR push behind it. So it was the one movie that actually got out there with a legitimate distributor who later went out of business and changed hands like 5 times. I don't even know who owns the rights to that. I mean, I own the rights to the movie now, but it changed hands so many times that it made me kind of frustrated with the business in general. But to answer your actual question, I wrote the screenplay for that when I was about 26 years old, and I didn't end up making the film until I was 36, which was not by design at all. It was just kind of. It used to be a film about the basic idea of the film is about a woman who moves back to her husband's small town that he's from after some financial failure, and he gets back in with all of his high school friends, and she can't relate to any of them. And it becomes kind of a horror movie about this isolated woman in a small town with her husband and his asshole high school friends, and she can kind of assimilate herself into that group, and eventually gets dumped and stays in the small town and starts kind of terrorizing him and his friends. And I originally wrote it as like a horror movie where she kills them all off one by one, and, and it was very satisfying in a lot of ways, but at the same time it felt like just I'd seen that before. So I saved those murders for a later script that I never produced, but I'm very happy with actually that I wrote that about 4 or 5 years later. But I changed the second half of the Rid of Me script just to make it, something that was kind of personal and felt appropriate for the story, and also really easy to produce in terms of the resources I had at hand. It's one of those movies that, it was the first time I ever filmed something myself. Like I actually was the cinematographer of the movie. I'd been working in advertising. And so anyway, over the 10 years that I had written that script and the time I made it, I'd been shooting a lot of things in a documentary style, like making little tiny documentaries and things, and commercials and industrial kind of films. And so I kind of applied that style to that movie. Like suddenly I just had the option to just make this movie any way I wanted to. And so I kind of took the script as a template and almost shot it as if it was a documentary and changed it up and improvised with the actors. And it just became something very strange and weird, and it just felt right for what it was. And I messed with it I edited it for a year and a half. So that was sort of the trajectory. There was a lot more in there for sure. It's hard to remember back sometimes, but
well, I liked it. I liked the theme because it's like, kids are mean, but adults are meaner. I mean, that applies in a lot of ways, but I don't know. I still think kids are meaner.
it was one of those, it was kind of like a pseudo kind of John Hughes type movie where it was like a high school movie, but it was all, older people.
Very good. I like the look of it and like the colors and the way that you captured things and like the tones of it. I really appreciated it. That's why I was curious.
It was I always edit all my films, and in that one in particular, because I'd shot a lot of footage with with various HD cameras at the time, but I edited around a lot of my mistakes and a lot of the stuff, like there are a lot of people just kind of looking into the camera, like kind of setting the stage for scenes. That was simply me like being an amateur cameraman and like taking a lot of time to focus and having people just freeze, and it just became kind of a stylistic sort of component of that movie.
Right. Nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
James, you mentioned that you're currently working on a project that you're filming with your iPhone. What's that one about?
I'm actually shooting, do you guys know Brookings, Oregon?
Mhm.
Down there in the far southwest corner. My friend Denise, who has been in several of my films, just in little parts. She's become a good friend. I've known her for about 15 years. And I met her when she delivered cannabis, like in Portland back in 2005. Way before it was legalized. And of course, when it wasn't, once it became legal, her business kind of dissipated and she just started kind of becoming an activist. Anyway, she wrote a memoir back in 2017 about her really crazy life. She's 60, now she's 69 years old and she's trans, and she transitioned in maybe 2003, something like that. I've only known her as Denise. But she had, before she transitioned back in the 80s in San Diego, she had a crazy lifestyle, like with like drugs and guns and getting busted by the feds for selling cocaine. As far as from my lifestyle, as I've, a friend who's had the opposite of my life. And I've just been talking to her over the years, and I filmed a little bit of footage about 10 years ago for her book trailer, which became a thing. I don't remember when book trailers came into fashion, but people started making, movie trailers basically for books that were coming out. And she hired me to go out to Hawaii and film her and just interview her and just shoot some B-roll for her book trailer. And I made this sweet little 2-minute trailer of just her life and telling these really nutty stories from her past. And then about 2 years ago, in the pandemic, just kind of, doing little commercial jobs and things on my iPhone, because suddenly people wanted me, or the clients that I was meeting and eventually worked for wanted somebody who could just kind of be a fly on the wall and make these corporate videos for this annual meeting that nobody was going to be able to be present for. So I suddenly was shooting like 8 videos over in 2020 in July and August. I made like 8 different 3-minute videos of these different companies and flew all over the country and made these little movies so that the companies could be represented at this annual meeting without having to be there. And it ended up being one of the best jobs I've ever had, because I've done it for 3 years in a row now, and just using my iPhone and the Filmic Pro app and my own sound and just doing literally everything myself. Unfortunately, including the sound mix, which I'm not a fan of, but I can do it. It's not my my exact wheelhouse. I always do it pre-sound mix as I'm editing, but to actually do the final, delivery is kind of rough sometimes. But anyway, that kind of dovetailed with deciding to make a film about my friend Denise, and mostly just her telling her stories to his little old lady friends in Brookings, where she lives in a retirement community, and the reaction of these little old ladies to her insane stories of drugs and guns and crime and being in prison. And it's actually a very sweet movie, but I'm editing it. I was editing it right before we started this call. So
Well, maybe we'll see that for the 2023 Klamath Independent Film Festival.
yeah, totally. There's a pre-production trailer on my website if you want to check that out. It's something I made as I was just starting, using mostly stills of her as a young boy, and then the footage I shot for that book trailer I told you about. But it's a really funny film, and I don't know, there's so much to it, but it's hard to describe exactly. But it'll be an entertaining documentary, I think.
Anyone else have a question for James or a topic you want to bring up? I know, James, you mentioned that you were into skateboarding really big. And I remember a couple of years ago when we did our Q&A, we got off on the topic of skateboard movies, which has its own fun little subgenre, particularly when skateboarding became hugely popular in the 80s. Of course, I really loved the film Dogtown and Z-Boys, the documentary, and recently, well, I guess mid-2000s, they made Lords of Dogtown as well to kind of highlight the 70s skateboarding culture.
Mhm.
But for a time there were some, looking back now, I mean, there was the skate movies and like the whole Bones Brigade thing, with Tony Hawk and whatnot, built up this, they kind of invented their own film genre in a way of skateboarding films as tapes that would get traded at like skate shops and record stores and whatnot. which has its own fascinating subculture. But then when it became popular, we got some theatrical films that are bizarre even by 80s standards. Go back and watch like The Skateboard Kid and Gleaming the Cube.
Yeah.
And
Especially was a weird one for all of us skaters in 1988, I think it came out, which was the height of my skateboarding when I was like 16. And it was so weird because, yeah, all those Bones Brigade guys double for people in the film. And Christian Slater as the lead character, he's doubled by Rodney Mullen, who's like a freestyle skater, and Mike McGill, who invented the 540, the McTwist, which is like, you know, kind of like the ultimate half pipe trick. And they were such different skaters, but they both doubled for him in his two different styles of skating, which made no sense. And he would ride up to like these freeway barriers that we used to skate. You could do little kick turns on them, but he would do like a 540 off of one, which is impossible, like literally impossible. And it was so funny to watch that movie with my skater friends back in the day. And the wigs on the stunt doubles were so bad.
every now and then I go back and I rewatch some film that, you know, I have some odd nostalgia for because I remember seeing it like 30 years ago, right? I was like, oh, I remember that as a kid. And then I go back and watch, like, this has not aged well at all. And Gleaming the Cube was one of those, like, I'm not sure if anyone else has seen what we're talking about, but it's a Christian Slater 80s skateboarding movie where, you know, they'll show the close-ups of Christian like doing this, and all of a sudden it cuts to just the feet of an actual skateboarder doing some trick, and then it cuts back to just his head, you know, acting like he's on a skateboard. It's so bad, but it's one of those, like, it's so bad it's kind of good in its own cheesy 80s way vibe. I'm like, this was a thing culturally for a while, you know.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in years, but yeah, if he was just a street kid able to do those kind of tricks, he would definitely have to be a professional, because it was like insane stuff that character was able to do on the skateboard.
I see John joined us, better late than never, sir, but thank you for being here. You're just in time for when we're about to go into final comments and goodbyes, but
I just, you know,
Good timing.
yard sales and estate crap life, you know,
Yeah.
missed everything this summer. Gotta love my mom. Anyways, it's good to see you.
yeah. So our guest here, John, is James Westby. He's a filmmaker. We showed one of his films actually at the 2020 Klamath Independent Film Festival, a film about independent video stores. And we've been talking about the culture behind preservation of films that aren't necessarily prominent on Netflix and Amazon Prime, the people who go out and like collect old VHS and Laserdisc and stuff like that to kind of keep all of the indie culture films alive. I don't know if you have a passion for collecting films like that, or maybe you're going through the estate sale now and you're finding all these old VHS tapes that mom had.
Well, you know, there was a point in my life, yeah, where I was like, you know, back before we had the internet, you know, it's like, you know, keep all those episodes of Otherworld, you know, there's only 8 of them, you know, stuff like that. But, or The Phoenix, you know, okay, there's only 3 episodes, but I liked it. They canceled it, shouldn't have. But, you know, it just reminds me of even like on the computer stuff, it's like when people abandonware, you know, it's like if nobody keeps it, or I mean, if the manufacturers don't really care anymore, you know, is it okay for us to keep this stuff? And I kind of feel a little bit that way with some of the, you know, the old TV series or other things that they seem to not care about. Like you say, if they're just leaving it behind, you know, what's our options for retaining and keeping this stuff?
Yeah, there's places like like internetarchive.org.
Oh yeah, I've
that
used
just
that.
Yeah,
That's the
trying
best.
trying to save everything.
Yeah, but stuff keeps getting lost. You know, they don't have as much as you wish they had, unfortunately, because they only keep like little thumbnails of some of the pictures or some other little, or they might have some downloads as long as they're like less than like 5K or something stupid. You know, it's just, you know, stuff is still getting lost.
Yeah.
So
The statistic that I heard was 90% of all films made before 1940 have been lost.
Yeah.
Where
90%.
90%, and most of that is, think of the silent movie era.
Oh yeah.
The film was made with nitrate, which is basically like a form of silver. And they would make a film and they looked at it solely as a product. They would tour it around to theaters till it didn't make money anymore. And then they would melt the films down for the silver to then make new film. And so there was no thought of preservation as a creative art form or something historic. It was simply, it's our latest product that we're bringing out on the line. We're going to get as much money out of it as we can, and then we move on to our next product. And so the Hollywood stars of that early era were making films like every single week because they had to keep pumping out the shorts to get into theaters, and then that movie would be done, move on to the next one. And it was just it was a manufacturing line for film. It wasn't a thought of film as an art form. It's something that we can get suckers to pay a nickel for in the theater and make money off of, and then we'll make the next one, we'll make the next one, we'll make the next one, and just wash, rinse, repeat. So they would just destroy films. What's interesting, I'm sure James could talk about this a little bit too, even though we're running out of time. Every now and then, it seems like every couple of months, there's a story that pops up about some film that people have heard about that's been lost to time for decades. Or maybe it was lost in a fire in an old vault or something, and it ends up in someone's private collection. It was found in an attic somewhere, and so they upload it, and then now for the first time in 100 years, you can see this long lost film from some silent movie star from back in the era, or someone like Georges Méliès, who basically invented the art of narrative filmmaking in France. He torched almost all of his own films. But and there's a whole fascinating story behind him. A lot of his films then got duplicated and remade. So a lot of the films that are thought of as Edison films in the early turn of the century were actually Georges Méliès films that just got stamped as Thomas Edison, were actually made in France by this guy. If you saw the movie Hugo from a few years back, it kind of celebrates Georges Méliès' career, and there's been some documentaries to look at. This is a guy in the 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s that was creating narratives. He was a magician that decided, well, what if I put my magic tricks on film, and then I told stories around them? And he's basically invented the idea of not just pointing a camera at like still life stuff, but let's actually tell a story through film. He's the guy who did this, but most of his films, most of his films have been lost to history. Most of even the greats, Chaplin and Buster Keaton, most of their films have been lost to history.
Yeah, if you go into Movie Madness, the saddest thing is the foreign silent section. The silent section is pretty impressive. There's a lot of restored things, and obviously things that have just lasted, whether just on DVD or on VHS. But the foreign silent section is like maybe 20 films at the most. So there's I think to what you're saying about people searching their basements and.
Oh, did we lose internet connection? They're all frozen. Again, give it a second and see if it catches up again, or we may have lost the connection. Oh, okay. Sorry, we had a Wi-Fi hiccup.
Oh, gotcha. What was I saying?
I can still hear you though.
Oh, good. Well, there we go. Magnificent Ambersons. That's the movie that everybody really wants. In terms of like this film that somebody knows exists somewhere, but it was so mangled upon release that that nobody's ever seen the original version.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left here, and at the end of these things, I always want to give everyone a chance to give final thoughts, if they have a final quick question, or if they just want to say thanks to our guests. So we'll go around and give everyone a chance to chime in before we sign off. But thank you, everyone, for being a part of this. Joyce, why don't we start with you? Do you have a final quick thought or quick question for our guest? Or
I would like to say thank you to James for being our guest tonight. It was very enlightening for me. Having helped move several people over the years, I've seen box after box of VHS tapes, little audio disc tapes, what do you call those little cassettes? Yeah, so many things that just got probably trashed.
just thrown away?
Yeah, because no one wanted them or didn't have the means to play them. And oh my God, I can't tell you how many. I'm encouraged to know that someone is saving them though. So it was great meeting you.
Likewise, thank you.
Howard?
Jane, just thank you for being here. We appreciate the generous use of your time. It's been a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I love learning everything I'm learning.
Nice.
Wayne, any final thoughts or question?
I gained a lot from this. James, John, seems like we're on the same page, and sometimes I think I'm just this crazy Irishman that is out on his own. But it's like I've got hundreds of movies, loads of record albums, and books that I've been reluctant to sell because these to me are a treasure of history and can't really be replaced. And there are things that could possibly happen in the world or the United States that we could never get that back. And these are treasures to me, and I appreciate hearing how much you both appreciate them. It makes me feel not so weird. So thank you for that.
John, I know you joined in late in the conversation, but for what little you've been able to pick up, any final thoughts or a question for our guest?
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed everything. One thought was when I was in Provo, Utah, there was a kid named Blair Starrett, and he created this thing called the Lost Media Archive, and you can kind of maybe find stuff on it. But he'd have like weekly get-togethers, and he'd always play these really oddball, esoteric things, and I couldn't quite figure out what in the world he was trying to accomplish. But I finally figured it out. It was that he was trying to find the gems out there of things that you would never know about. And one thing that always stuck in my mind is that, I mean, a really hard to find obscure movie that he found out of a bin, and he said he had all these magazines and things that were talk about all these things, and they did not have this in there. But it was it was just not like an Asian movie. But at one point they started singing like that song from Beetlejuice, like the Day-O. I'm like, what in the world are these guys doing? But it was hilarious. I was just like out of the blue. I'm like, they introduced this song, and I'm like, but it made the thing very memorable. So I mean, there is so many things out there, and I wish, now I understand why some people hunt these things down because they will be lost, and I think there are a lot of treasures out there. I mean, there's a lot of things a lot of us don't even know is out there, and so we appreciate, like James and others, helping us learn about them. I'll have to maybe try and get a little bit of this thing from recording, maybe from Kurt at some point. But thanks for coming. Sorry I'm late.
No worries. Thanks for that.
One of my favorite things to do, John, like one of my favorite pastimes is simply like if I'm traveling somewhere, I will always try to find the thrift stores in town and just start digging. Or if there's a record store, I love digging through the cheap bins because honestly, some of my all-time favorite albums I bought for 50 cents just on a whim. The cover looked interesting and I bring it home like, this is awesome. Why is this only 50 cents? Like this is great. Why wasn't this a huge hit? If you just put in the time to search, there are treasures that abound, even here in Klamath, things that I've found. I mean, as a filmmaker, I went over to Treasures over on South 6th like a year or two ago. They were about to reopen to the public and they let me come in to take a look at all of their photography stuff. And sometimes like stores don't even know what they have, right? Like they put a tag on it and it's like, okay, whatever. So I'm digging through a lot of old broken vintage cameras, and there's old collections of like slides and whatnot, which were interesting to look at, of like, who were these people, where were they, what were they doing, like old family trips in the 50s and stuff. And I came across like a $400 tripod that they had tagged for $5. I'm like, oh, I'm taking this. I'm keeping this right here. Like, of course, the store had no idea, it's something that somehow ended up on their shelves, and it was like buried back behind things, like back behind, you had to actively search this out. But here's this like piece of filmmaking, like really, I mean, James, you know as well as anybody, the value of a really high quality, heavy duty tripod can be hundreds of bucks, right?
Yeah.
And so this was a nice like Bogan heavy duty tripod that they had a $5 tag on. I'm like, oh, that's a score and a half right there. So those kinds of things, one man's trash is another man's treasure. You just kind of have to know.
Yeah.
Kurt, one other thing is, since I've been cleaning out my mom's house, she had tons of these old clothes, and I know that sometimes they want period clothes for things, and I feel so bad because I've taken tons of it to Goodwill, and I took a last load to Treasures, but I feel kind of like, well, if any of you guys in the theater or stuff or film want to have a look through before it all goes away, you might want to. And we've just been going through like pricing out her old jewelry and costume jewelry, and a lot of people have really enjoyed some of the things they've found in the last 5 or 6. Yeah, tomorrow's yard sale number 6.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, it's just driving me nuts. But I do find some of my grandpa was a photographer. He had a lithographic printing company in Salt Lake City for years, and he'd always he'd always put on these really cool slideshows, and I kind of miss that. Slides are not the thing they used to be in the past.
Yeah.
And it is a nice thing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's
Like
interesting.
this right here was hand painted by a friend of my dad.
Uh-huh.
What do you do with that? You keep it, right? And I've got more. It's just
That's the Burbank Airport where they shot that final scene. John, one thing that you might want to consider is both the Ross Raglan and the Linkville.
Oh yeah, that's Lincolnville. That's right.
They are always in need for clothing, for costumes, for whatever the next play may be. So you may want, before you take it off to thrift stores, just say, I have a bunch of old clothing. Might this be useful for you for costumes at some point? The Raglan has limited storage. The Linkville has a whole collection of stuff in the back. They might have some use for it. And I've given away a lot of stuff. My dad died a couple of years ago, so we gave a lot of stuff away, but it was stuff that we knew would be useful to other people. And I would it's great to support a thrift store, but if you have something that can go to good use again, that's always the best.
Well, that's why I've been meaning to talk to you. I just, she's been so busy, so I apologize.
Yeah. And Andrew, any a final question or any final thoughts on our conversation tonight?
Yeah, I was just going to say this was a great conversation, a fantastic meeting. James, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your thoughts, especially on the value of looking back on the treasure hunting era of VHS and video store, just nostalgia and looking through where we all really came from with that. And I wanted to ask you, how do we keep track of what you have coming out and what you have ahead? Any new releases, any social media or anything you think we should follow that you've got out there?
The movie that I mentioned is called Oh Denise, Denise exclamation point. And my website is filmsbyjameswestby.com, and it has a little like a section just for upcoming things. I guess the only upcoming thing is that movie because it's all I'm working on until it's done. But I definitely want to get back into the narrative world, and I've been very inspired by shooting. Everything that I make now, narrative or documentary, my main thing is that I don't want to spend a lot of money, or I don't want to raise money. I just want to start shooting. And so everything that I'm doing now, that's the kind of MO for.
What do you mean by narratives exactly? Is it just like a documentary where they talk, or what?
something that's written as a script and
Okay.
performed by
Oh,
actors.
narrative being like more like a movie, drama,
Like where
sci-fi,
a lot of
things like
the
that.
a lot of the stuff that I do like kind of combines the two of those, you know, narrative and documentary. But I want to get back into. I'm working on a script now that's kind of a low budget action movie that I'm going to shoot with my and several other iPhones. The iPhone technology has kind of changed been a game changer for me, both in the commercial world and in just being able to shoot something that immediately looks good and is appropriate for what I'm making.
If you want to do low
Awesome.
budget action, may I suggest you make a film based on Ghana film posters?
Yeah.
or at least commission one of those artists to do the poster for the film.
I mean, there's so much inspiration from those posters that you could take a film in a really unique direction.
Exactly, I agree. I'm glad you had that little slideshow. That was great. I was saying I've seen all three of the, or however many you showed. I've seen all of those, but I'd forgotten a couple of them.
For everyone who's a part of this meeting, if you want to go deep down the rabbit hole tonight, Google Ghana film posters and you'll have some fun.
Yeah.
It may keep you up at night, but you know,
Yeah,
you keep finding more and more.
The Instagram account is called Deadly Prey Gallery. Prey, Prey.
Deadly Prey. So if you're an Instagram user, check out Deadly Prey Gallery, and they'll just have a bunch of pictures of the Ghana film posters on there that you can check out.
Really insane. They make no sense and they make perfect sense at the same time.
Well,
I was gonna
James,
say, thanks again, James, and I'm looking
Right,
forward to Denise.
James, I want to give you the floor for any final thoughts. Hey there, buddy. Any advice to our filmmakers or film fans in the call, or anything else that you want to say? That
I mean, I always am just like you know, a huge proponent of low budget production, which I think I just went into with regard to wanting to make things that don't. That's my daughter Cleo right there. That don't have to cost any money. The technology exists that I can strap my iPhone in and use the Film Pro app. Actually, the movie Tangerine I recommend highly, because that was like the first movie shot with an iPhone that people took seriously, that actually got into Sundance and actually had a really interesting theatrical life. But just being able to use this, you know, I mean, I know people that rent cameras that cost, you know, their camera lighting budget is enormous, like 10 times what I would spend on an entire film. The fact that you can actually just make a movie, and again, it's not for everybody, but you can make a perfectly good looking film on a low budget with an iPhone, and you don't have to pay for any of that stuff. You just focus on the actors and the writing, and you know, that's just what I'm trying to do with each new successive film. And documentary even more so. I mean, I definitely, you know, pay money to get down to Brookings to film my friend Denise and to fly to Wisconsin to film her old haunts and things like that. But it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. And so many people spend years raising $200,000. And sometimes by the time you're done raising that money, it's like, you don't even want to do the movie anymore. I would rather just start filming and just figure it out along the way. I also hate crowdfunding. I mean, I appreciate it, and I'm kind of obsessed with my friend Tara, who just every month seems to raise another 30 grand for some independent film she's shooting, and I always give $50 or $100 if I can. But I just I can't. You know, it's so hard to make a movie, and you have to make something that you love above all, because you're the one that has to live with it forever, whether or not it does something big or nobody ever sees it. And I've been all over, you know, both sides of or all sides of that, you know, that outlook. I just want to make things that I like and that don't have to cost a lot of money.
James, I heard of this organization. You may have heard of it, Klamath Film. You got a lot of equipment, cameras and lighting and sound, and all kinds of stuff. And you know, it takes, I think it's, what is it, $25 a year?
$25 a year, and people can check out all of our professional film gear. We've got cinema cameras, lighting, tripods, mics, staging. So Billy Joe, if you're working on something for KCC, $25 a year and you get full access to our collection of thousands of dollars of professional film equipment.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
$25. That's a lot of money, right? Thousands of dollars of equipment.
Yeah, so that's just one of the things that we do. But James is right. I mean, we're in an era now where it's no longer cost prohibitive to make films. That wasn't always the case. But as you go through your classes, Billy Joe, you're going to find out that, he's making a film with his iPhone right now. What I tell my students when I teach my summer film camp is that the tools that you have on your cell phone in your pocket right now are more powerful than the $50,000 cinema cameras I was using in Hollywood a decade ago. But no one knows how to actually unlock it. You don't take the time to look at all of the different settings. You just default to automatic. You just press record or you just press take the photo. But it has all the tools in it right then and there to be able to make high-grade cinema films. It's no longer about how much money do you raise? It's about, do you know how to actually use it? And can you be creative with the tools that exist right at your fingertips?
Yeah, and 30 years ago, we raised money for films and all that money went toward capturing the image, which now that doesn't cost anything, or doesn't have to cost anything. Back in the day, that's where all the money went. Like I raised 50 grand for a movie in 1994 and all of the money went toward film stock and the camera rental.
Wow.
And lighting. And now
It's,
it's just completely the opposite.
$25 plus shipping costs.
Nah. Well, Kurt, did Ninad get to have any final thoughts?
I'm sorry, to what? Oh, Nina, yes. Yeah, so Nina was able to chime in. So
Okay.
everyone
just
had
a little bit.
Yep.
I just want to tell James, thank you, because I use my cell phone for everything. And when I was in school, I got the most shit for using my cell phone for doing all my movies. But I've actually won film festival awards for doing my movies on my cell phone. So I love it, and I love Filmic Pro. It's one of the best apps I've ever used.
I agree. I'm getting better at it. And the new, incidentally, I have an iPhone 13 now, which my movie, Denise was filmed mostly with the old, like an 11 with the 8-bit camera. But the new, starting with the 13, it shoots ProRes movies, which is a complete game changer because you can literally just start editing. You don't have to transcode any footage. You can just start editing your footage. So you're getting the same codec, same output that you'd get from the mini Alexa.
Yeah, I used the 12 and I've had no problems with it, with converting and anything. It's been great. I love it. It saves you so much money. So all your money goes where you need it to be, not on your phone and on your camera.
I say spend money on your actors. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nina, if I skipped you. I thought that it would give you a chance to chime in. That's my bad.
No, it's okay. It's all good.
We've run long, and I know everyone has places to be and dinner to eat, but thank you everyone so much for coming out, and thank you everyone for joining us online, and thank you, James, for being a part of this. We hope to see maybe Denise we get to see for next year's film festival. So keep us in mind when you have things done. We'd love to
done by then for sure.
Yeah, we'd love to see your future projects, and I know you've done a lot of things, but like I said, at the video store, I genuinely loved in the 2020 Film Festival. I'm glad we were able to bring it to a Klamath audience, and I highly encourage people to go check it out. If you have nostalgic memories of going to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video or the neighborhood family-owned video store, it's a fun, very, very funny romp through that whole era in history. So go check out his film at the video store.
Nice. Thanks,
James,
guys.
thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you, everyone. We will be back here the first Thursday of November from 6 to 8, same time. Featured guest TBD. And also Cameras and Cocktails first Wednesday of every month in Ashland, Medford. I go every month, so if anyone wants to carpool with me, you're welcome to join in. That's also an in-person networking meetup for filmmakers in Southern Oregon. So you want to go out to that? That's usually 6 to 9 in Ashland, Medford.
Kurt, I'll buy the gas to ride with you.
Well,
The
and
Cameras and cocktails.
right, and the reason why Wayne says that is because I own an electric car.
Nice.
Thank you very much. That was fun.
Thanks for being a part of it, James. Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great night.
Thank
You too. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.